This is the Strait of Hormuz. Well, this to be precise. To the north we have Iran, including these islands, and to the south we have Oman. This is the maritime boundary agreed upon by the two states. At its narrowest, between Salama and Lark Islands, it's only about 34 kilometers or 21 miles wide. But even here, the actual shipping lanes are even tighter. In 1974, the International Maritime Organization, based on proposals by Iran and Oman, set up the Traffic Separation Scheme to better regulate the high volume of shipping traffic which flowed through the strait. The scheme creates two lanes, each 2 miles wide, one for incoming traffic and the other for outgoing traffic. These lanes are separated by a 2-mile wide buffer zone. Now, as you can see, the traffic lanes are in Omani waters, but based on an agreement between the two countries, they permit patrols in each other's waters to maintain security in the strait. Just before the US-Iran conflict, we had about 100 to 130 ships transiting daily. About 60% of these were carrying oil, which is about 20 million barrels a day. In fact, 1/5 of all the oil consumed globally passes through the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of all liquefied natural gas is shipped from Qatari and Emirati ports and then travels through the strait. This is about $600 billion worth of energy trade annually. Now, the oil from the strait isn't divided equally among states. Some are far more vulnerable than others. 90% of the oil goes to Asian countries, so 30% of, say, China's oil, 45% of India's, about 80% of Japan's, all come through the Strait of Hormuz. But there's another issue. There is no real alternative, at least not in the short term. Saudi Arabia and the UAE run these bypassing pipelines, but they can only transport about 5 million barrels a day, far less than the strait's 20 million barrels. After the US-Israeli attacks on Iran on the 28th of February, Iran almost immediately started issuing threats to ships transiting through the strait. This led to a 70% reduction in transiting ships within hours. But this was no surprise. Everyone knew this was Iran's strategy if it was ever attacked. And it's a strategy that seems to be working. Now, how does Iran actually control the strait? What are the different tools that it has at its disposal? Well, firstly, you have the Iranian Navy. But much of this has been destroyed by US and Israeli strikes. But interestingly, Iran has a second navy as well, the IRGC Navy, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. And they have small, incredibly fast boats, like the Zulfiqar fast attack boat or the Haidar 110, that can swarm ships, especially large, slow, undefended tankers. You then have a whole host of Iranian anti-ship and anti-radar missiles that can be launched from coastal positions as well as more deeper inland. These include the short-range Nasr that would be fired from the Qashm Island or Iran's coast if they were deployed there. Longer-range missiles include the 170-kilometer ranged Noor, 200 to 300 kilometer ranged Qadr, and the 1,000 kilometer plus ranged Abu Mahdi, which can reach ships all the way out into the Arabian Sea. And then there's the Khalij Fars, an anti-ship ballistic missile designed to kill aircraft carriers. It comes in at Mach 4 with a 650 kilogram warhead. You also have the Hormuz 1 and the Hormuz 2, which home in on a ship's radar emissions, meaning the better a US destroyer's radar is working, the brighter a target it becomes. Iran also has its now infamous drone fleet, including the Shahed 136, a delta-winged one-way attack drone that is cheap, slow, low-flying, and hard to shoot down with expensive naval missiles. In the opening days of the closure, around March 1st, Shaheds are believed to have been responsible for the first real strikes on commercial shipping in the strait. Then Iran has a stockpile of somewhere between 2,000 to 6,000 sea mines. In this conflict, US intelligence has identified two specific weapons in the water, the Maham 3 and the Maham 7. The Maham 3 is a 300 kilogram moored mine. It's anchored to the seabed and suspended below the surface using magnetic and acoustic sensors to detect passing ships. So even a non-magnetic hull can set it off. These types of mines don't have to be touching the ship. Once they go off, they create a shockwave and a collapsing air bubble which pushes upwards towards the target and can have devastating effects on a ship's hull. The Maham 7 is a 220 kilogram bottom mine, a sticking mine that rests on the seafloor in shallow waters, specifically shaped to scatter incoming sonar waves so minesweepers can't really find it. And on top of all of this, Iran has been running electronic warfare across the strait, jamming GPS signals so ships' navigation systems drift, and spoofing AIS transponders so a tanker's broadcast position suddenly shows up in the wrong country's waters. Ships can't navigate if they don't know where they are, and escorts can't protect them if they're being tracked to the wrong coordinates. Now we have to keep in mind that Iran doesn't actually need to sink ships. It just needs insurers to believe it might. Every commercial tanker carries war risk insurance, and the premium is recalculated daily based on threat assessments from underwriters at Lloyd's of London, the world's oldest and largest insurance marketplace. Before the conflict, insuring a supertanker through Hormuz cost about 0.125% of its value. Within days of the closure, that quadrupled to past 0.5%. For a fully loaded, very large crude carrier, which carries about 2 million barrels of oil, that's an extra 1 million per transit at the minimum. At a certain point, insurers simply stop writing policies altogether because it's just too dangerous. And without insurance, no ship owner, no bank, no charterer will move the cargo. The ship stays put. On 9th April, Iran's IRGC issued a map with revised shipping lanes. For incoming traffic, the path was between Keshem and Larak Islands, and for outgoing traffic, it was just below Larak, allowing for IRGC escorts, boardings, and vessel identity verification. These are all the ingredients you need to impose a toll, and that is exactly what they did. It's no wonder then that this is what states are calling the Tehran toll booth. And by bringing shipping lanes within their own waters, Iran is making a statement. It has sovereignty over the strait. But this raises a bigger legal question. Is any of this actually lawful? And the answer matters because global shipping is built on the principle that no single country can hold the world's trade hostage. The Strait of Hormuz is what's called an international strait under the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. Articles 37 through 44 establish the right of transit passage, which says that ships of all nations have a continuous, unimpeded right to pass through international straits. And crucially, that this right cannot be suspended even in wartime. The International Court of Justice affirmed the same principle all the way back in 1949 in its Corfu Channel case. Now, Iran's response is twofold. First, Iran never ratified UNCLOS, so it argues that transit passage doesn't bind it, and that only the older, weaker regime of innocent passage applies in the strait, which can be suspended on security grounds. Essentially, every major maritime power disagrees with this position, pointing out that transit passage has hardened into customary international law and therefore binds Iran whether it ratifies the treaty or not. Second, on March 30th, Iran's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee approved what it calls the Strait of Hormuz Management Plan. As international law expert Safiya Saudi writes in Eagle Talk, the more significant development isn't actually the closure itself. It's Iran's attempt to codify a new legal regime, charging around $2 million per vessel to transit, collecting the fees in yuan and cryptocurrency, and barring ships linked to the US or Israel at any price. But UNCLOS Article 26 explicitly prohibits charges levied on foreign ships by reason only of their passage. Iran's fee isn't payment for any service rendered, it's a tax on existence. As Saudi puts it, it would transform a legal right of passage into a purchased license. So the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a military crisis, it's a legal one. If Iran succeeds in turning this stretch of water into a toll booth, the precedent ripples outward to every other choke point on Earth, the Straits of Malacca, for example. 20% of global oil, $600 billion in annual trade, all of it hanging on whether the international system can still enforce its own rules.